Okay, if you're in HR, you've probably seen some pretty confusing, maybe even alarming headlines about the NLRB's joint employer rule. So let's cut through all that noise. We're going to break down what's really going on and give you the practical takeaways you need to know right now.
Right. So you might have seen some news that made it sound like this massive, game-changing rule was set to drop on February 27th, 2026. And understandably, that made a lot of folks in HR pretty nervous. So let's get straight to the point and clear this up.
You know, it's a classic tale of the headline versus the reality. The headlines were all screaming about a broad new rule taking effect. But the reality, it's actually the complete opposite. A new rule isn't taking effect at all. Instead, an older, much narrower standard is the one that's officially back in place. That date was just a formality. To really get what's happening now, you have to understand how we got here. And trust me, this isn't just a boring history lesson. This whole back and forth timeline directly shapes the compliance strategy you need to be using today. So look at this roller coaster. Back in 2020, we got a pretty clear standard: substantial, direct, and immediate control. Simple enough. Then, in 2023, things got complicated with a proposal for a much broader rule. But here is the absolute key part of the story. In March of 2024, a federal court struck that new rule down before it ever even started. So that 2026 date, that was just the paperwork, officially taking the dead rule off the books. So what does this all mean for you and your team? It's simple, really. That 2020 standard, the one based on substantial, direct, and immediate control, is the law of the land. It's what's been in effect since that court decision, and it's what you need to build your compliance around, period. Okay, so we know what the rule is, but why does it matter so much? Well, because the stakes for getting this wrong are incredibly high. We're not talking about a slap on the wrist or some small fine. Getting this wrong can fundamentally change your business's labor relations and legal liabilities. Let's just imagine for a second, what actually happens if your business is told it's a joint employer of, say, a contractor's employees? Well, under the National Labor Relations Act, the consequences are serious, and they can have a massive ripple effect across your entire operation. The potential fallout here is huge. All of a sudden, you could be forced to the bargaining table with a union that represents another company's workers. Your business could become the target of picketing. And maybe the scariest part? You could be held legally responsible for unfair labor practices that your vendor committed. All right, so this whole thing really hinges on that key phrase, direct control. So let's break down what that actually means in the real world, day to day. This is where we get out of the legal weeds and into what your managers are actually doing on the floor. Here's the core concept. We're not talking about an occasional suggestion or some minor one-off thing. The NLRB is looking for consistent, meaningful, and hands-on involvement in the core conditions of someone's job. It has to be regular, and it has to have a real impact. And the rule is super specific about where the NLRB is going to look for that control. They're checking to see if your company has that substantial, direct, and immediate control over one or more of these 8 areas. Honestly, you should think of this list as your compliance checklist. This chart just lays it out so clearly. It really shows that practical difference, right? It's all about setting broad goals versus micromanaging the day-to-day. For instance, telling a contractor what outcome you need is perfectly fine. But telling their employees how to do their jobs, well, that's crossing the line. Same with discipline. You can report an issue, but you can't be the one making the call to suspend someone. It's about managing the contract, not the contractor's people. And this quote right from the regulation, this is so important. What it's basically saying is that under this 2020 rule, what your managers are actually doing matters way more than what's written in a contract. Just having the right to control something isn't the problem. You have to actually be using that control directly and consistently. So, with all that in mind, let's turn this legal standard into a clear, actionable plan for your HR team. This isn't about avoiding vendors or contractors. It's about managing those relationships smartly and safely. Here it is, a really powerful 3-step strategy to protect your company. 1. Review your contracts. Make sure those boundaries are crystal clear. 2. Audit what's happening on site. Does reality actually match what's on paper? And 3, and this is crucial, train your managers. They are your first and most important line of defense. And I really can't stress this enough. When it comes down to it, the NLRB is going to focus on what your managers are doing every single day. An investigator isn't just going to read your service agreement. They're going to be out there talking to workers and supervisors to find out who's really calling the shots. Your manager training has to be incredibly specific. You need to tell them point blank, your main point of contact is the contractor's supervisor, not their individual employees. Their job is to manage the outcome of the service, not to direct the people who are doing the work. All right, let's wrap this all up. If you only remember a few things from our chat today, let's make it these key points. These are the core principles. So forget those confusing headlines. Remember, the 2020 Direct Control Standard is the law. What you actually do, especially what your managers do, is what really matters. And the key to all of this? Manage the service, not the people providing the service. So I'll leave you with this question to take back to your team. It's the one that should really drive your compliance efforts from here on out, because when it comes to joint employer risk, your actions will always speak louder than your contracts.